This hearing will come to order. This is our 12th hearing of the Special Committee on Aging in the 118th Congress. Today we'll discuss a topic of growing national significance, employment for people with disabilities. As of January of 2024, the labor force participation rate of people with disabilities was 40.5%. That number is up from 32.7% in just since April of 2020. So significant growth in that short time period. Disability employment is at the highest level since record keeping began in 2008. More people with disabilities are looking for, are finding, and are retaining employment than ever before. These increases in disability employment are happening as more states and businesses move away from segregated sub-minimum wage employment into competitive integrated employment. We, like everything here, we have to have acronyms, so some of us may refer to CIE for competitive integrated employment. This means that people with disabilities are paid at or above minimum wage, and that they also, with competitive integrated employment, would have opportunities for advancement and work alongside people with disabilities and people without disabilities. Competitive integrated employment is possible for all people with disabilities and is the standard for disability employment. In this, let me just get our pamphlet here. In this pamphlet, you can see, and I'll go to the picture here on the third panel of the pamphlet. The pamphlet is entitled Competitive Integrated Employment, the Standard for Disability Employment. And then on this panel, we make reference to Hannah, who's a sales associate. She's a young woman with intellectual developmental delays from southeastern Pennsylvania, who's working in the stockroom at her retail job. You can also see on another panel here, Chris, right on the bottom here. Chris is a deaf-blind man from central Pennsylvania working as an accessibility engineer from his computer at home. So there's a lot of variety to this employment. Competitive integrated employment is truly possible when we work with businesses and workers to create situations that work for everyone, that work for the employee as well as the employer. That is why my Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act, the so-called TCIEA legislation, provides essential support to states and businesses to facilitate successful transitions to competitive integrated employment. Senator Daines from Montana is a co-sponsor of that bill. This bill makes it so people with disabilities who want to work will be able to work. Workplaces across the country have achieved this reality, and we will highlight that success in today's hearing. We'll hear from experts and people with lived experience about what people with disabilities need to thrive in the workplace. Our witnesses will be able to speak about successful employment outcomes in various work environments, from small businesses to large corporations. With the right support, people with disabilities can thrive in their work environments, and we must create an ecosystem that supports their ability to do so. This happens by ensuring that they find a good match in an employer. It happens by creating healthy work environments that balance the right combination of natural supports and reasonable accommodations so that people can thrive in the workplace. And it happens by ensuring businesses have the proper resources and the support they need to provide their employees with these healthy work environments. That's why I'm also proud to once again sponsor the Disability Employment Incentive Act during this Congress. This bill would expand 3 existing tax benefits to businesses that successfully hire and retain people with disabilities. The Disability Employment Incentive Act would help support businesses that hire people with disabilities in competitive integrated employment. This bill supports the transition to a fully integrated workforce with people, or where people with disabilities work alongside people without disabilities for equal compensation and have the same opportunities for advancement as their peers. We have seen substantial progress in disability employment in recent years, as we made reference to the gain in percentage of people that are in the workforce. But even with this progress over just a few short years, people with disabilities continue to work at almost half the rate of people without disabilities. So when we increase from 32.7 to 40.5 in the workforce participation rate, that was great growth for a short period of time. But still, at that 40.5 level, that's still half the rate of labor force participation compared to those without disabilities. So we can do more and we must do more to employ people with disabilities. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses who will provide lived experience to the committee and to the nation and also we'll hear about solutions to further increase competitive, integrated employment for people with disabilities. And I'll turn to Ranking Member Braun.
Thank you, Chairman Casey, and thanks to the witnesses being here today. It's great to see a record number of Americans with disabilities being employed. Hope we can continue these gains despite economic turbulence with inflation at levels we haven't seen in a long time and over 3% and high interest rates to boot, but we generally get through that as a country, and I think we will this time as well. My home state prioritizes the ability of Hoosiers with disabilities to earn a living and support themselves with their families. Indiana is a proud employment-first state. This means understanding how hardworking, motivated, and entrepreneurial these individuals are. We'll learn more about this today from Jeff Mittman, the CEO of BOSMA, a great Hoosier and himself and an organization that goes above and beyond. Indiana is blessed to have many businesses and organizations empowering people with disabilities. In Knox County, for instance, a county near where I live, KCRC invests in commercial sewing and other manufacturing equipment to accommodate workers with disability. It talks about its workforce as a commitment to freedom for people with disabilities to work when and how they want. We should keep that freedom in mind as we consider the best strategies to help with employment and be careful to avoid limiting choices. Opportunity Enterprises in Indiana connects Hoosiers with disabilities to good jobs and helps other businesses learn to do the same. It appreciates flexibility in policy. It's clear that one size does not fit all when it comes to disability employment and policy. That's why a growing number of individuals are starting their own businesses to improve their own economic security. As a farmer small business owner, I'm always happy to promote initiatives that encourage entrepreneurship and businesses at the smallest level. It can be rewarding for employers, employees, and the communities in which their businesses serve. People with disabilities are more likely to be self-employed than those without. May not seem intuitive, but that's interesting because I think they, with those challenges, are going to have to be entrepreneurial and innovative to sometime make their way. I like that. There are currently more than 1.8 million business owners with disabilities in the U.S. That's a lot. We must continue to support these entrepreneurial individuals so they can start and expand their own businesses. Senator Sheehan and I introduced the Supporting Disability Entrepreneurs Act, which directs Small Business Administration to designate a coordinator for disabled small business concerns and collect voluntary data on disability status of small business owners. This is an important first step in removing some of the barriers for disabled small business owners and ensuring they have access to SBA programs. Thank the chairman for his support of this legislation. Look forward to hearing more from the witnesses today and how we can make things work better for all of you. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Braun. Now I'll introduce each of our witnesses, and then we'll get to their testimony. First, our first witness is Ms. Erin Willman. Ms. Willman is the founder and CEO of White Cane Coffee Company. She will share her experiences as a business owner with disabilities who employs people with disabilities in Warren County, Pennsylvania. So thank you, Ms. Willman, for being here today, for sharing your story with us and traveling a great distance. That's a good ride from Warren County. I now turn to Ranking Member Braun to introduce our second witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Mittman is the president and CEO of Bosma Enterprises. He's also president of the National Association for the Employment of People Who Are Blind. He retired as a master sergeant after over 20 years in the Army. In all these roles, he is dedicated to service. Thank you for all your service, Mr. Mittman, along the way, and thank you for being here today.
Our third witness is Mr. Frank Helmer. Mr. Helmer is a full-time data analyst, graduate student, and trained accountant. He's also a self-advocate with autism who, early in his career, worked at a business that paid him sub-minimum wage. Mr. Helmer will share his experiences transitioning from a sub-minimum wage job to a competitive and integrated career where he uses his extensive skills and abilities. Mr. Helmer, thank you for sharing your story with us today. Our fourth and final witness is Dr. Lauren Avallone. Dr. Avallone is an associate professor at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. Her work focuses on supporting people with complex disabilities to find and retain competitive integrated jobs. Dr. Avallone, thank you for sharing your expertise and for being with us today. So now we'll start with each of our witness statements, and we'll start with Ms. Willman. You can begin.
Hello, I am Erin Willman. I am the founder and CEO of White Cane Coffee. Before I begin, I would like to thank Senator Casey, Senator Braun, and all of the members of the Aging Committee for inviting me to come down to this nation's great capital and for having me to speak on a subject that is very dear to my heart. When I lost my vision at the age of 15, I went through a very familiar experience for many disabled teenagers. I started to question what my future was going to look like. As many young people do, I went looking for employment only to be met with rejection time and time again, and due to the fact that people could see my white cane and all the things I couldn't do instead of all of the things I was capable of. After all of this time and all of the continuous rejections, I started to become discouraged. I was beginning to question what my worth was. After going to the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, I was told that I would never be able to have competitive employment. Thankfully, I have wonderful and supportive family members. On a particularly bad day, my dad tried to cheer me up by playing a game. It was a thought experiment on what I would do if I could create a job since I couldn't find one. We'd come up with a coffee business. My reasoning at the time was that coffee is something that is known to bring people together. So why not use that to bring both able-bodied and disabled people together? We kept talking about it for days until we realized we could create a business like the one we imagined. And we named it White Cane Coffee. From the very first discussion, we knew we wanted to do two things. We wanted to have the Braille on all of our packaging, and secondly, we wanted to hire other people with disabilities so that they could have the same opportunity for competitive employment. I figured that if I wasn't getting hired due to my disability, others in my community might not be faring much better. Now, I knew at the time a little bit about the sheltered workshops due to my older brother working in one for a time when I was younger. While working there, he was being paid $1.50 an hour, which is not only much less than minimum wage in Pennsylvania, but he was losing money due to the price of transit. He was also not allowed to pack a hot lunch or use the microwave in the kitchen, and the able-bodied staff not only looked down on him and the other disabled employees, but kept a cold distance from them. Needless to say, he was my first employee. Meanwhile, at White Cane Coffee, our staff has full access to warm meals and have always been treated with respect. Some businesses treat their employees like liabilities. We always treat ours as assets. As my business grew from an online store to a brick and mortar shop, I was able to hire more people with disabilities. That growth has also given me the privilege to speak with schools for the blind to discuss with students about their futures. I will never forget the day we hired an employee we'll call Jay. He had also worked in a sheltered workshop. When he came to us, he said that he was willing to work for $7.25 or less. The or less caught our attention. Along the way in his life, someone had made him feel like he was worth less. To this day, I am deeply upset that he was made to feel that way, but I also think of all the other disabled people in this country on who are either going through such an ordeal or already have. When we hired him, we made sure that he knew that he had worth, that he would be starting at $9 an hour, and that we could not wait to see him come in on Monday. He has been an incredible employee since that day. No matter what, he is always on time, and even when he has to walk through terrible weather. He has also risen in our business and is now a team leader and is teaching other employees. All of this because someone believed in him. I've noticed the same loyalty and drive in all of my employees. I've never before heard a group of people speak so enthusiastically about their jobs and being able to talk to their families about what they're doing at work. Since opening our company, we have won numerous ethical employment awards due to the fact that we treat people like people. If one small coffee manufacturing company in Pennsylvania can achieve such success, there is no reason for larger companies not to do the same. Even making smaller changes to adapt the workplace increases productivity and morale while also lowering employee turnover. The rhetoric that people don't want to work anymore is simply untrue. People want to work, they just want to be treated and paid what they deserve. I have always said that if you change one life, you change the world. By passing the Transformation to Competitive Employment Act, you will be changing countless lives. I implore you all, change the world. Thank you.
Ms. Willman, thank you very much for your testimony. We'll turn next to Mr. Mittman.
Chairman Casey, Ranking Member Braun, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I am Jeffrey Mittman, the President and CEO of Bosman Enterprises, a nonprofit social enterprise based in Indianapolis, Indiana. At Bosman, we are the largest employer of Hoosiers who are blind and the only provider of comprehensive blind rehabilitation in the state of Indiana. We employ nearly 200 individuals, 50% of whom are blind and work at all levels of the organization. In 2005, I was deployed to Iraq and was critically injured in an ambush by an improvised explosive device that took the majority of my eyesight. After several years of medical care and recovery, I restarted my career at National Industries for the Blind and was introduced to the Ability One program, a program that today employs nearly 40,000 Americans with disabilities. After leaving NIB, I went to work at the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. And while I was there, I simultaneously served on the board of directors of Bosman Enterprises and was eventually appointed as the president and CEO of that fine organization. Employment is the backbone of society. It allows for economic independence and allows individuals to take care of their families. The Ability One program was designed to create opportunities for people who are disabled. And it does that through the procurement of government goods and services at a fair market price. There are currently 500 organizations all across the country within the Ability One program, and it was at one of those organizations 2 decades ago that a blind individual created the suspension system and the padding that I wore in my helmet that day that I took a full bomb blast to my head. The Ability One program and that individual saved my life. At Bosma Enterprises, we're the primary provider of examination and surgical gloves for the Department of Veterans Affairs through Ability One. Our employees are paid competitive wages and benefits and are extremely proud of the service they provide our nation's veterans. And we're vital to protecting those veterans during the pandemic. See, at Bosma, our mission is to provide opportunities for people who are blind, and we do that through a work environment that allows them to thrive and meet their goals. In addition to employment, Bosma provides blind rehabilitation and training. And we came about doing those programs when the state of Indiana asked to transition them to us because they saw how effective we were employing people who were blind and how well we did. But those programs run at a deficit. But this public-private partnership thrives because of the Ability One program, the state of Indiana, and our donors' generosity. As part of those programs, I have a dedicated team of individuals who assist people in finding employment outside of our organization. You see, the freedom to work where you choose is important. Much like employment's the backbone of society, the freedom of choice is vital to all of us as individuals. Unfortunately, sometimes for blind individuals, that freedom of choice is being restricted. The government sometimes severely limits or excludes Ability One providers as an employment choice for people who are blind or disabled. And I think that's due really to a misunderstanding and an inconsistent application of the definition of CIE. You see, I think we run into trouble when we say somebody who's blind working next to somebody blind is of less value, that job is of less value than it is for somebody who's blind working next to somebody who's not. You know, as a wounded warrior, we never tell a wounded warrior where they could work or that they couldn't work with other wounded warriors. And as I described at Bosma, our employees receive cross-training, upper mobility. As a matter of fact, 15 of my leaders in the organization are blind or visually impaired. And we're an employer of choice because of that. That's evidenced by our low turnover rate and our high employment satisfaction surveys, the scores. So I'm extremely proud of Bosma. As I said, we offer them cross-training, we offer them upper mobility, and we'll assist them in leaving the organization if they'd like to work somewhere else. So I see our program, the Ability One program, Bosma, as a vital source for employment for people who are blind. And with that, I thank you again for having me here today.
Well, Mr. Mittman, thank you for your testimony and thank you for your service to the country. We'll next turn to Mr. Helmer.
Senator Braun. My name is Frank Helmer, and I would like to start off by thanking you all for having me here to testify before the Senate Aging Committee concerning my experience with sub-minimum wage workshops and competitive integrated employment. I am honored and thankful to you all for this opportunity. I am a person with autism who has worked hard and has been blessed with a good job currently as a data analyst at a major health insurer called Centene Corporation. Centene, in my experience, has one of the most inclusive hiring processes I've ever seen, going above and beyond the letter of the Americans with Disability Act to embody the spirit of disability employment. I am testifying today on my own initiative and do not represent Centene or claim Centene's endorsement for being here. Two things I like about my job are having supportive coworkers, as well as having work that challenges my mind in a way similar to puzzles. I develop and run SQL scripts, a type of software code to extract data from databases and send it to its stakeholders. I enjoy it when I get to learn a new trick or a new way to do something with my programming skills. One thing that makes my job accessible is a flexible work schedule, where as long as I'm getting stuff done and producing results, they are not too concerned about strict hours. I also work from home, which is helpful for when things get frustrating at work, so I can be as expressive as I want to be and no one has to know about it at work. The flexible schedule also helps me to go to the grocery store with my home and community-based waiver staff during the day and then come back and make up those hours later in the day or later in the week. Being able to earn good wages has enabled me to obtain my own apartment, go back to school to finish my master's in health informatics, purchase a gaming computer, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox Series S, among numerous other blessings. In my free time, I like to play classic computer games like Doom and Quake due to the multitude of user-made mods and content available for them. I am able to work in competitive integrated employment because Arkansas has a somewhat unusual program called Workers with Disabilities Medicaid. I am a beneficiary of the Community and Employment Supports CES waiver program, which has a 10-year wait list. Normally, a person on Workers with Disabilities Medicaid cannot earn more than 3 times the monthly SSI rate, supplemental security income, per month without losing their Medicaid waiver eligibility. However, the Arkansas Workers with Disabilities Medicaid program overrides that limitation, so you can work for as much as you want and still maintain your waiver services. With my increased wages, I am able to buy better groceries and stuff that I like, which are mainly electronics and video games. I am also able to save for the future and for retirement as well. In May 2016, I graduated from Arkansas Tech University with a 3.9 GPA and a double major in accounting and business data analytics. I was able to get through college in large part due to a very supportive faculty who looked out for me. I also met my best friend, Pastor Miller there, who preaches at Glen Rose Missionary Baptist Church, where I still attend today. He made me feel welcome, included me on field trips for professional organizations like the Society for Human Resource Management and their conferences. In December 2016, I passed the CPA exam, Certified Public Accountant exam. I'm not a licensed CPA, but in 2017, I started an internship to obtain my CPA hours. However, pushing for all these goals left me little time to more properly process my grief over my mom's passing from cancer in 2015. And so I mentally broke down in 2018, halting my internship for over a year while I recovered in various institutions before finally being able to be fast-tracked onto CES waiver. I am thankful, especially to my friends who continue to believe in me during this dark time and moved mountains to ensure I had the resources and care I needed to recover. Most people would have given up on me. In 2019, I started working in a sub-minimum wage workshop, working 30 hours per week and making between $30 and $120 every 2 weeks. At the workshop, I worked in a wash bay washing cars and machinery, one time spending over an hour inside a car on a hot summer day washing stuff. In the middle of 2019, the workshop had a rate adjustment and our wages started to go down. By October 2019, when I got a $35 check for working 30 hours per week for 2 weeks, I've quit because the work made me feel exploited. And then after quitting, I went back to finish my internship, which I had started back in 2017. And a couple of months later, a job opportunity came up at Centene, which my financial guardian alerted me to. I applied for it, went through the interview process, happily working there today. My 4-year anniversary will be in May 2024. Thank you all.
Mr. Elmer, thanks for your testimony, and it's an inspiring story. Dr. Avalone?
Thank you to the committee for allowing me to speak with you today about a topic that I feel deserves renewed attention and pressing changes. And thank you, Mr. Mitten, for your service. Employment is a major life activity for most adults. While we have seen recent increases in employment among Americans with disabilities, they still participate in the workforce at much lower rates than their peers without disabilities, and are more likely to be working part-time and in jobs below their potential. They are also legally allowed to be paid below the federal minimum wage as a condition of their employment through the issuance of 14C certificates by the U.S. Department of Labor. In many cases, they are paid less than $3.50 an hour. Put plainly, people with disabilities are a massively underutilized group of talented individuals, many of whom want to work and could contribute significantly to our workforce. I have spent the majority of my career assisting those with the most significant support needs, access education, and employment. These are individuals who are skilled and capable people, but who also happen to need extra help in areas of daily life. These individuals are at the highest risk of being excluded from work. I would like to be clear that when I say individuals with disabilities should have greater opportunities for workforce participation, I am including those with high support needs. When I refer to work, I mean competitive integrated employment as defined in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act of 2014. This is full or part-time work among people who do not have disabilities with pay, benefits, and opportunities for advancement that are equal to those received by people with similar experience and credentials. I am referring to the same type of work Americans without disabilities choose to pursue, not work in segregated settings or those that pay below the federal minimum wage. This distinction is important because people with disabilities who participate in competitive integrated employment experience improved quality of life, the same as those without disabilities. They demonstrate significant growth in major areas of personal independence, including home living, community engagement, lifelong learning, health and safety, socialization, and self-advocacy skills. We now have over 40 years of research identifying evidence-based practices that lead to competitive integrated employment. These interventions do not require preparatory training before pursuing work. They're personalized to meet the unique needs of every individual. They include direct support from a service provider and heavily consider the needs of both the person with a disability and the business, which results in a job match that is mutually advantageous for both. Despite these interventions, we still see persistently low employment outcomes. It is difficult to see how the needle will be moved if the following areas are not addressed. Making specialized transportation options more available, reliable, and affordable so people with disabilities can get to and from work. Professionalizing the role of the employment support provider so that those implementing evidence-based employment interventions are adequately trained. Increasing funding for long-term supports which promote long-term job retention and upward mobility. Increasing work-based learning experiences to ensure that youth and young adults have applied work opportunities prior to exiting high school. Increasing access to post-secondary education programs for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities to engage in career preparation and training. Making sure all people understand how to work and keep their disability benefits. And eliminating 14C certificates that enable workers with disabilities to be paid below the federal minimum wage. It is time we stop thinking about who can work and who cannot work, and instead be thinking about what we can do to help all people with the desire to work become employed. As we look to the future, I hope to see employment outcomes for all individuals with disabilities greatly improve, not only in terms of becoming employed, but also in terms of higher quality employment outcomes that reflect higher wages, more full-time employment, long-term job retention, greater access to fringe benefits, more advancement and upward mobility, and the securement of more diverse jobs in a variety of industries. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Dr. Avalone, thanks very much for your testimony. As everyone knows, on a Thursday, we have senators who will be in and out of the hearing, and I want to, in this case, cede my time for now to my colleague from Pennsylvania, Senator Fetterman.
Thank you. So, as we have today, people with disabilities are sometimes paid pennies an hour. I've said for years that we need to raise our federal minimum and wage, in that I should be up to at least as a minimum of $15 an hour. Right now, federally, it's now $7.25 an hour. But I really, just to put that in perspective, $15 an hour working full-time, that's $31,000 a year. And that's challenging to live on that. Can you imagine, and there are millions of Americans that are faced having to do on that as well, too. And now the fact is that we have people being paid $1.50 an hour simply because they have a disability, and that's outrageous. And I would like to point out that I have a disability. And with having that disability, I'm not getting paid any less than all of my colleagues here at the table or in the Senate as well, too. And now to discuss my own disability at the moment. Right now, because of after a stroke, now I rely on captioning. That allows me to participate fully as well. And I am going to describe what it is for those that this allows me to participate fully, is that. And now I'm not earning any less money a year for the same job that all my colleagues are as well, too. And I wouldn't want that for me, and I wouldn't want that for anyone on that as well, too. And so as to the point is like, Dr. Avalone, what is the evidence that employers can't afford to pay employees with disabilities a livable, and I want to also emphasize, on a dignified wage?
Well, the truth is if those employers were having any other individual who doesn't have a disability performing that work, they would have to pay at least the federal minimum wage. So from a finance structure, there doesn't make any sense to me in terms of how that can't be worked out.
Well, I mean, so to be clear, so I want people to understand that folks with disabilities are able to be legally allowed to pay less than the federal minimum wage.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour.
That's correct.
So it's legal to pay less than that, which is already an outrageously low amount of money. So if is that legal to pay someone with a disability, say, $2 an hour? Is that legal?
It is legal to pay somebody less, as low as $3.50 an hour, and even less than that, pennies on the hour.
Okay, so what kind of dignity is being paid less than even already shameless low minimum wage? Is there any dignity in that?
No, these are capable and talented workers who can contribute immensely to the workforce, and they should be compensated for their efforts the same as any other American without a disability.
So, and that's the point. It's like I fundamentally believe that there's dignity in every job and in working, but how are you able to really have the dignity if you're legally allowed to be paid pennies on the hour on that, let alone living in at all with without even dignity as well too. And I want the opportunity to just highlight that fact as well. As a member of the disability community myself, I would not want that for myself, and I now absolutely don't want that for anyone. And I always thought I was empathetic before, but after I developed my own disability, that's made me much, much more empathetic. And I'm grateful for having my platform to highlight that and to address that, hopefully, in our society as well, too. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Fetterman, thanks very much, and thanks for sharing your own personal story with us. I'll next turn to Ranking Member Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield my time to the senator from Nebraska.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this hearing today. I appreciate it. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. People with disabilities are living longer due to the advancements in medical technology and public health. And in order for people living with disabilities to achieve financial security, which is what we all want, they want to have it during their working years and they want to have it in retirement. They need employment opportunities and supportive services to help them secure and maintain good paying jobs. And it's just absolutely vital. Studies show that employing individuals with disabilities is good business. Individuals with disabilities offer many advantages, including a highly motivated workforce, lower rates of absenteeism and employee turnover, greater loyalty, and higher rates of satisfaction and productivity among the entire workforce. And as governor of the state of Nebraska, when I would talk to employers, one of the things they always said is, we cannot find enough people to hire. Maybe they just weren't looking in the right place. Nebraska has talented people who want to work regardless of disability. Back home in my state, we are working to make sure that we are affording opportunities to be able to hire people with disabilities and pay competitively for those talents. Individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities in the workforce in Nebraska receive coordinated employment services through vocational rehabilitation, through a partnership with the Nebraska Department of Education, Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and Department of Health and Human Services. The partnership works toward competitive integrative employment that includes pay at or above minimum wage that is not less than what others without a disability are receiving for the same type of job at a location where the employee interacts with other employees without disabilities in comparable positions and has opportunities for advancement. The partnership also provides career counseling, employment information, and referrals to individuals with disabilities who want to work. So it is absolutely critical that we leverage all the talent in our country with this workforce shortage and make sure that people with disabilities have those opportunities. So actually, I'll start with Mr. Mittman. And again, thank you very much, Mr. Mittman, for your service. You have extensive experience managing and working with disabled employees. Can you speak to some of the most common misconceptions about employing a disabled worker?
Thank you, Senator. I believe some of the biggest misconceptions about employing people with disability is just the misconception that they don't have the same skills as everybody else, because they do. I believe also that when it comes to accommodations on the site, in the workplace, I think a lot of employers believe that there's a significant expense to those accommodations, which is just not true. I've seen a recent study recently where I think the average accommodation was $300 or something like that. So it's not, it's a miseducation of employers that they believe that employing somebody with disability could bring additional liabilities and additional expenses. And I think those are the greatest common misperceptions out there.
So, Mr. Mittman, you're running your own business. You know that hiring and training a worker is expensive, right?
Yes, sir.
Just a time. How would you compare the cost of attracting somebody to work for you and training them versus the cost of the accommodation?
Well, people with disabilities have a very low turnover rate. They have a very low turnover rate. And when you bring somebody in and who's struggled to find employment, they're very loyal to the organization. They have a lower absentee rate. They stay for a long time. So the investment in an employee is much cheaper and costs a lot less than it does if you're having to turn over your employees all the time. So it's absorbed into the loyalty and the effectiveness and the abilities of the individual.
So would you say the benefit of the accommodation, which you said one study showed that was like $300,
Approximately.
the cost of the approximately $300 is far outweighed by the benefit of having somebody who you retain longer because it costs so much to attract and retain people. Is that a fair statement, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So actually, the cost-benefit trade-off here for employers is when you hire people with disabilities who are you're going to be able to keep longer, you're going to have less turnover, that benefit's going to far outweigh the extra cost for the accommodation. Mr. Chairman, I'm just about out of time. I just got one more question I'd like to ask Mr. Mittman if I could.
Sure.
Just, Mr. Mittman, could you talk a little bit, so given that we believe here that, the cost accommodation is going to be far outweighed by the benefit of the lower turnover rate, just one example, what's the best way to educate employers about these misconceptions and overcoming some of these misconceptions?
Well, I know at Bosma Enterprises, as I mentioned, I had a dedicated team of individuals who assist people who are blind and visually impaired finding employment. And one of the things they do, one of their biggest tasks is, as they're out assisting individuals find those employments, they're actually educating the employers prior to the employees showing up and sharing the experience and sharing what we're talking about, the long-term benefits of hiring somebody with a disability. But being in there and working directly with the employers is the best way. An active engagement of the employers is the best way to educate them on the benefits of hiring somebody who's disabled.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Mittman. Again, thank you for being here, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ricketts, thank you. I'll go to my questions now. I'll start with Ms. Willman. As we've heard today, a number of inspiring stories, and I wanted to ask you a question about what you faced before you started your business. But you shared during your testimony that you started the White Cane Coffee Company because you had trouble getting employers to see your true potential. In fact, in your testimony, you said, and I'm quoting, quote, "I went looking for employment only to be met with rejection time and time again due to the fact that all people could see was my white cane and all of the things I couldn't do instead of the things I was capable of," unquote. And then you went on to begin to start the company, White Cane Coffee, now 12 employees, along with 76 affiliate employees across the country. These include blind persons who work from their home, and now White Cane Coffee is a sought-after employer in your community. You hire, retain, and promote people with disabilities, and accessibility is part of your company culture. So I'd ask you this, after facing all those difficulties of finding a job yourself, how does it make you feel to be able to hire people who have faced similar challenges that you had?
It is a wonderful feeling to give back to my community and to raise up other people with disabilities because they have gone through probably worse things than I have, whether they were disabled due to an accident, born disabled, or have become disabled due to aging. These are all, and unfortunately, there is bullying when it comes to disability. So when they come to work for me, they get to find a sense of community, and that has, you can hear it in their voice, how much that means to them. And so I am as proud as can be of all of my employees so whenever I hear them, and just I am very thankful for the chance I have been given to be able to give them that hope.
Well, we thank you for the example you're providing for other employers. What are your plans to grow your business and to continue to be a model employer?
I mean, the ultimate goal is to have a white cane all over the country. Wherever there are disabled people, there should be somewhere that they can have gainful employment. So why not a White Cane Coffee?
That's great. Well, we're happy to hear about that. And before I turn to Ranking Member Braun, I do want to ask Mr. Helmer, a question about his experience. You shared with us you needed to work a sub-minimum wage job. Am I right that you, in terms of the timeline here, you were working in that sub-minimum wage job that you described at the end of your testimony after you had passed the CPA exam?
Yes, sir. Yes, Chairman Casey. I was in that sub-minimum wage workshop after I had passed the CPA exam.
Yep. And even though you were working between 30 and 35 hours per week, you were only being paid between $35 and $120 for your work. You found a career that pays you a fair wage. You have current success. Your current success is a real testament to your potential and a reminder that we should not unfairly judge people because of their disability. And while you no longer work for sub-minimum wages, there are currently 42,000 employees nationwide who do. So, Mr. Helmer, what can you share about your experience working in a sub-minimum wage workshop and sharing information about that would provide folks out there a sense of the reality of that, but also some inspiration for those who are doing that work now to be able to rise above it if we can continue to get employers to change their perspective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chairman Casey. In the sub-minimum wage workshop, it was in the summer, it got really hot and sweaty in there. We would load these giant trays, the Caterpillar trays that equipment manufacturer. You have these giant black trays that had oil on them. You'd stick them 2 at a time in this giant water tank, and then heated water tank, and then rinse it off, and then you'd wipe it down you'd wipe it down and all that, and then we were doing all that just to get between $35 and $120 and every 2 weeks, and you'd wrap them with a wrapping tape and all that. So it was just a lot of work, a lot of sweat for nothing.
Yep. Well, we're grateful to hear about how you've been able to progress beyond that, and we're grateful that you're here today with us. I'll turn next to Ranking Member Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question will be for Mr. Mittman. Many employers strive to integrate people with disabilities into the workplace alongside their non-disabled peers. You mentioned in your testimony that the standard for integration can be unfair even for major sources of employment like Ability One. Could you expand upon that a little bit?
No, absolutely, Senator. It could be unfair in that as the president of NAEPB and as the president and CEO of Bosma Enterprises, I can tell you that our organizations did away with 14C years ago. All our employees are paid competitive wages and benefits. And I think what's going on is I think sometimes the Ability One program gets wrapped up into the concept of a sheltered workshop, which I would argue we haven't been in decades. You know, the Ability One program of 2024 is not the Ability One program in 1975. There's a lot of modernization efforts that go on, and we do provide those competitive wages and benefits. We do provide upward mobility, and we even provide assistance to our employees who want to work somewhere else. And I think sometimes we're unfairly categorized as that sheltered workshop and not, competitive integrated employment. And I think that needs to change because I said it's the individual's choice of where they really want to work. If they're being paid competitive wages and benefits and they have a chance at upward mobility, I think they should have the choice to work there, be offered that option as they go through the vocational rehab at the various states.
Yeah,
so.
Thank you for that. And then one thing caught my attention. You have youth services. Briefly, can you talk about how that has worked and what that is about? Because it seems like it would even be harder to engage young people with disabilities into a business. How have you been able to accomplish that?
Well, Senator, we have the Student Training and Employment Program, because what we found with youth who are blind or visually impaired, most of them had no work experience. They didn't know how to be an employee because they had never experienced that. So what we do is, as they're coming out of high school, as they're coming through high school, pardon me, and they're preparing to graduate, we bring them in and find them opportunities to work throughout the community during the summer and sometimes during the year, depending on their schedules. And it gives them that concept of what's required of being a good employee, showing up on time at the right place, doing the right thing. And we're able to provide them that opportunity and expand their network and get that experience as they either move on to further education or move out to the workforce.
Very good, thank you. Dr. Avallone, K through 12 disability career readiness is a topic. Is that receiving the attention it needs? Because I know in my own home state where I live, K through 12 education, especially middle school, the high school, is still not matching up high demand, high wage jobs with what the marketplace needs. Talk about that as it applies to disability.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think we've made great strides in recent decades in terms of recognizing the need to better prepare transition-age youth for employment, particularly the advent of the pre-employment transition services, which are focused on helping youth and young adults gain 5 different areas of preparation in order to move into competitive integrated employment. I think one of the weakest areas that we see is an emphasis on work-based learning experiences. I spoke to that in my testimony just a bit. Work-based learning experiences provide real work opportunities for youth. It creates opportunities for them to engage in applied settings, work with actual employers to gain a resume, applied work skills, gain experience in terms of having a resume when they leave to better position them to apply for jobs. It also creates an opportunity for them to have a network to find employment after they leave school. We know that experience in work during high school is a significant predictor of competitive integrated employment after high school. And so we need to increase our emphasis on promoting those opportunities for youth before they're at the age where they're entering employment.
Thank you. Ms. Willman, from one entrepreneur to another, I know when I went into that direction, sometimes it's daunting because you're sticking your neck out, you want the independence, it's euphoric when you get going, and it's a great place to be once you make it through the 1 to 2 year period, which calls out so many, 5 years, even 10 years. What would you advise to other entrepreneurs interested in disabled? What was the thing or two that enabled you to make it through the all the gauntlet of challenge to get where you are?
One thing I would always say is to start small and then work your way up, but more importantly, surround yourself with people on who know things you don't. For example, I am terrible at math. Anyone who knows me knows I am horrific at math. Someone who isn't horrific at math are one of my employees. I have surrounded myself with people on who know things I don't know. And so I listen to them, I take their advice, and with their help, I am able to build a better working environment. So, yeah, surround yourself with people on who are smarter than you at things. It seems sort of weird. And also, surround yourself on people on who believe in you, but not people on who will agree with just everything you say. Because sometimes you will have an idea, and once you say it out loud to someone, they will let you know that it is the dumbest idea they've ever heard, and that is okay.
Well, good advice. And one final question for Mr. Helmer. You were lucky to find a place like Centene. From your observation, are there enough Centenes out there? And when you were looking, did you have other options, or were you lucky to have found Centene because there weren't many out there?
Yeah, there needs to be a lot more Centenes out there that are just, that have integrative hiring processes and integrative inclusive employment and all that. There needs to be a lot more Centenes out there because, yeah.
Very good. I'm glad it worked for you, and I think that's a notice to businesses out there. Maybe expand your horizons. Might end up being lucky getting somebody like Mr. Frank Helmer.
Thank you, Ranking Member Braun. I have maybe two more questions. I do want to note for the hearing record, as I said, we've had several senators in and out to ask questions. We also had senators who were here and couldn't remain, but were here for the hearing. That was Senator Rick Scott was here, as well as Senator Blumenthal. And I want to make sure that and I know we're a little bit short on time, but and note for the record as well that the number of employers across the country who are still in the sub-minimum wage category is coming down. Just looking at some of the numbers, just since 2015, when we had a little more than 2,500 employers across the country, we're now down below 1,000 to the most recent number I have is 834. So that number's coming down. More and more employers realizing that you can employ people with disabilities and not only give them an opportunity, but also give your company an opportunity to grow and to thrive. I wanted to ask Ms. Willman about a related tax issue. You indicated that from adding Braille to your machines and products to modifying work schedules to suit your employees' needs, you've put significant effort into accessibility. As we transition towards a more inclusive workforce that welcomes disability as part of diversity, it's important that businesses and business owners are supported, that they have some help doing that. My legislation, the Disability Employment Incentive Act, would help ease that transition by expanding tax benefits, meaning existing tax benefits, including the Work Opportunity Tax Credit to support companies and nonprofits that hire and retain people with disabilities. So, Ms. Willman, I'd ask you, how would expanding tax benefits for business owners like you help provide the resources to make your business even more successful?
It would allow not only my business, but other businesses the opportunity to have more access to equipment that will make areas more accessible. I mean, when we first got our first Brailler, it was quite pricey. I mean, at first we typed it all out in hand, but then we got into Brailler, and so things quickly sped up from there. And throughout the years, we have also have beeps on in our machines so that the people, so that my employees on who are visually impaired, they can still know when the machine is active. There are sensors around onto the room. We make everyone's workstation accessible to them. So, and if you add the tax onto it, that it incentivizes other companies to do the same. Mm-hmm. So this way, all workforces can have disabled employees. They just need to do the research and find out what their employees need, and with the tax and extra revenue that you would be giving. it would make it more accessible for them as well to make it accessible for their employees.
Well, thank you very much for the perspective you have as an employer. And my last question is for Dr. Avallone. The definition of competitive integrated employment was put into statute recently as part of the, well, not quite recently, but 10 years ago, as part of the 2014 Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. In your testimony, you talked about the importance of this definition and the positive impact that it had on for people with disabilities and employers in your community. Your work demonstrates that nobody is too disabled to work in competitive integrated employment or to deserve fair wages for their work. Can you talk about the importance of the current definition of competitive integrated employment and share some examples from your work that demonstrate its impact on people with disabilities?
Yes, thank you. I think one of the most important parts about the current definition is that it focuses beyond simply achieving a job, and it looks more comprehensively at achieving quality employment outcomes. So that includes part or full-time work as a preference of the individual. It also focuses on integration over segregation. It also looks at equality both in pay and benefits. And it also examines upward mobility so that we don't have individuals with disabilities staying in the same entry-level positions for their entire employment term. Essentially, to the individuals that I work with, that definition allows them access to the same type of employment any other American without a disability would have. I mentioned in my testimony several success stories of people that I have worked with, and the definition of CIE, or competitive integrated employment, allows them to be impacted in ways that are highly beneficial, both personally for them, but also for everyone around them. The level of integration, quality, and upward mobility has resulted in, for those individuals in my testimony who work in critical care and other areas of hospitals that are essential for that hospital, it gives them a sense of pride. It gives the patients in the hospital better services. It makes the hospital more efficient. And for their parents, it gives them a sense of comfort knowing that they have a sense of community around their child. And so the elements that comprise that definition lead to wide-reaching benefits for not only those employed, but those in their circles around them.
Thanks very much, Doctor. I'll turn to close out our hearing unless Senator Braun, do you have any other questions you wanted to ask?
Good on questions.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, everyone. I want to start by, of course, thanking our witnesses for their testimony. We always have interesting, informative testimony in this hearing, and we had that today. But not too infrequently, and today's one of those days we have testimony that is both interesting, informative, but also inspiring. And I want to thank all of you for providing that kind of inspiring testimony. Today's hearing highlighted policy solutions for successful employment outcomes for people with disabilities, especially those with higher support needs. When we are intentional about taking a person-centered approach, people of with all kinds of disabilities can work in a competitive integrated employment. It's shameful that some people with disabilities are being paid sub-minimum wage. Thankfully, phasing out this discriminatory wage is a bipartisan priority. I'm proud to work with Senators Daines and Blackburn, as well as Senator Van Hollen, to make sure that my Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act reflects that reality and that we work to pass that into law. I invite any of my colleagues in the Senate and members of the committee to join us in that effort. I'll continue to work to ensure that people with disabilities have what they need to succeed in competitive integrated employment. I look forward to working with this committee and our witnesses to improve the rate of disability employment throughout the country. So I'll turn next to Ranking Member Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for sharing your inspiring stories and your experiences. It's important that we recognize the progress made in expanding opportunities for Americans with disabilities who want to work as employees or entrepreneurs. We should address precise challenges in the workforce and exercise, that caution you need to make sure that you offer opportunity in a broad array of areas. One size hardly ever fits all. We need to preserve flexibility, freedom, and opportunity for all people with disabilities to work where, when, and how they want, and at a dignified wage. I am encouraged by the positive trends in disability employment and hope we can keep our focus on flexibility along the way. Thank you again for all being here today.
Thank you, Ranking Member Braun. I want to thank again our witnesses, Ms. Willman, Mr. Mittman, Mr. Helmer, and Dr. Avallone, for your testimony and the expertise you bring to this hearing record and in this hearing today, and of course your own personal stories. If any senators have additional questions for the record or statements to be added, the hearing record will be kept open until Thursday, March 7th. Thank you all for participating in this hearing. We are adjourned.